So, we've made it to another year's end, and I think it's fair to say that things have not been great in the year of our Lord 2022. I'm not even going to try and list off the travesties that have occurred in the last 12 months because they'll be considered quaint by the time this video ends up actually going live. So, with what little pleasures we have left being eroded before our eyes in real time and oh dearism on the rise in almost every sense of the word, what better way to see out the year that was 2022 than with Silent Night, Deadly Night 2? A film that seemingly only had contempt for its audience from its conception. Exactly why the film has ended up the way it has is up for a lot of debate, but from what I've been able to find, it looks like the producers basically wanted to just re-release the original Silent Night, Deadly Night in 1987, but with some newly shot additional footage bolted on to help sell it to audiences as some kind of extended cut or special edition. Similar to how Uli Lamel made Boogeyman 2 by basically just bolting on some police interrogation footage to the original Boogeyman. However, the screenwriters accidentally ended up writing a bit more material than was required. There wasn't enough for an entirely new movie, but there was enough to justify altering the idea from it just being a re-release of Silent Night, Deadly Night with additional shots, to it instead becoming a new movie which was heavily propped up with footage from the original Silent Night, Deadly Night. And the word heavily there is doing a hell of a lot of lifting. In essence, what they've effectively done here is created a film that's about a third to a half made up of footage from the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, with linking narrations and additional newly shot footage making up the other half to two-thirds of this thing. And it's here that the problems really kind of begin. But before that, let's get into the plot of this thing. So the film takes place 4 years after the events of the original Silent Night, Deadly Night. The film opens with Ricky, Billy's younger brother, in some kind of prison or mental health facility where he's clearly not playing with a full deck, and is about to talk to his latest psychiatrist, Dr. Bloom. Ricky scoffs at this during the introductions as he's already seen 12 psychiatrists before Dr. Bloom and doesn't think anything's going to be any different this time. Nonetheless, Dr. Bloom asks Ricky about his childhood, and Ricky begins to recount the events of the first movie, occasionally interrupting the film to add additional fluffy narrative links and to help build up Ricky's character as a very angry, cold and demented character who wants to punish anyone who he deems to be naughty. Now, what was the plot of the original Silent Night, Deadly Night? Oh yes, I remember it as if it were yesterday. The film opens with a series of flashbacks, first to 1971, where a family are heading over to a mental institution on Christmas Eve to visit their elderly grandfather who's a resident there. The grandfather hasn't said a word in years, but when Jimmy and Ellie, the mother and father to young kids Billy and Ricky, leave Billy with the grandfather while they go to get an update from the doctors on his condition, the grandfather briefly springs to life, telling Billy that Christmas Eve is the most terrifying time of the year because Santa judges you as to whether you've been naughty or nice, and if you screw up even once in the whole year, well, Santa's going to have to punish you in a very serious way. This scares Billy, and while on the drive home he tells his parents that his grandfather spoke to him. The parents largely dismiss the idea, but at least keep it in mind as something to look into once the festive season has passed. This of course all comes at the worst possible time, because while driving through the back roads they come across a guy dressed as Santa who's broken down by the side of the road. Naturally, with it being a dark and spooky back road, they pull over to try and offer to help. But Santa pulls a knife and proceeds to gut the father and molest and gut the mother shortly thereafter. Billy, clearly traumatised, escapes from the car and goes to hide in the bushes while the carnage unfolds, and is later found with his brother by police. We then skip forward to 1974, where Billy and Ricky are now in a Catholic orphanage being raised by nuns. Billy's clearly showing signs of ingrained trauma about the incident, with triggering flashbacks to the night in question being commonplace and a repeating problem where all of his associations with Christmas are related to death and violence. The Mother Superior of the orphanage is appalled by Billy's attitude and vows to correct him by any means necessary, which here means strict punishments over any negative outputs towards Christmas, and an attempt to flood Billy by making him do as much Christmassy stuff as possible whenever that time of the year rolls around. This seemingly, however, only compounds the issue further, and when we jump forward 10 years into the future to the present day, 1984 Billy has grown into a tall, strong, quiet type who just wants to do his work and keep his head down, seemingly. The nuns managed to get Billy a job as a stock assistant at a local toy store. He's moving boxes all day, but hey, it's good, honest work. That is until Christmas rolls around, and he begins to once again become plagued with night terrors and triggering flashbacks to his parents' murders. After being in the job for a few months, Billy's co-workers and supervisor are starting to get a bit frustrated with Billy's performance. With Christmas rapidly approaching, Billy is disappearing for large swathes of time and is becoming despondent and distant. The manager warns him to book his ideas up or he'll speak to the big boss and get him fired. Billy's feeling down about life, but things are about to get a whole lot worse. When the toy store's Santa falls and breaks his ankle, the boss decides as a cost-saving measure to replace him with Billy for the rest of the season. Billy's incredibly reluctant, but he needs the job, so he does it. After a couple of days of what I can only imagine was Billy's idea of abject hell, the store finally closes for Christmas, and the owner and the employees decide to lock up early and have a Christmas party in the store. Billy tries alcohol for the first time, and while slightly inebriated, he catches his asshole supervisor and a girl who works in the store, who Billy has a crush on, sneaking into the back room for a bit of bouncy bouncy. Billy follows them into the back room and catches the pair making out, only I think the girl thought that only making out was on the cards, because the supervisor clearly has other intentions. He starts trying to get a little bit more than a kiss, a lot of a little bit more, and this finally tips Billy over the edge. In a blind, slightly drunken fury, he garrots the supervisor with Christmas lights, and when the now rescued girl calls him crazy and tries to run away, Billy guts her. Thus beginning a night of terror and carnage as Billy unleashes his repressed emotions by mowing down multiple people with whatever tools are available. All the while, the police and one of the sisters from the orphanage race against time to try and capture Billy before he kills again. That makes up about 40 minutes of the runtime, and the rest of the film follows the story of what happened to Ricky. It's revealed that after the incident at the orphanage, the place got closed down and the children were all rehomed into foster care. Ricky ended up living with a family called the Rosenbergs, a decent bunch who apparently don't celebrate Christmas. And for a time, things were going pretty well. That is until one day while Ricky is out shopping with his stepmom, where he sees two nuns walking down the street. This triggers flashbacks which his mum dismisses, but when the nuns walk into a store and start messing around with some red fabric, the flashbacks become all too vivid, and Ricky effectively ends up seizing up in the street. His stepmom only figures out what's going on way too late to do anything about it. So, a couple of days later, the Rosenbergs go back to the orphanage to ask exactly what had gone on in Ricky's past. The nuns reassure the Rosenbergs and tell them that, with love and support, these episodes will be minimal and should hopefully in time subside completely. At which point, we then jump forward another 5 years to when Ricky's stepfather passes away. This seems like a bit of a traumatic turning point for Ricky. He decides to manage his grief by taking long walks along the back roads around his hometown, sometimes for hours at a time. It's here that things start heating up a bit, as while out walking one day, Ricky spots a young couple having a picnic in a clearing and decides to people watch for a bit. While hanging out, the fella, Eddie, decides that he's a bit horny and basically tries to initiate with his partner. When she refuses, he basically tries to rape her, and when she fends him off, he gets pissed off and goes to get a beer from his truck, which just so happens to be red. The combination of Ricky seeing this combined with the red truck tips him over the edge, and he ends up repeatedly running Eddie over with his own truck. The doctor's surprised to learn of these incidents as they've never been documented before, but Ricky seems nonplussed about the whole thing. Later, the doctor decides to ask Ricky about Jennifer, and this brings us more or less in line to the present day. Jennifer was Ricky's girlfriend for a time. The pair met when Ricky was knocked off his motorbike by Jennifer, and the pair quickly bonded. It transpires that Jennifer was Ricky's first proper girlfriend, and the person he lost his virginity to. And he assumed that Jennifer was a virgin too. This, however, was not the case, as after a few months into dating, Ricky takes Jennifer to the movies to watch Silent Night, Deadly Night. Anyway, there's a loudmouthed asshole in the screening who Ricky goes to deal with, and while he's away, Jennifer bumps into Chip, an old flame who apparently treated Jennifer very badly. When Ricky returns, Chip disappears to go watch the movie, but a short time later, while wandering around town, both Ricky and Jennifer bump into Chip again, who dunks on Ricky for being a bit lame and also calls out Jennifer for having low standards and for screwing Chip in the back of his car. Incensed, Ricky electrocutes Chip with a car battery, and then when Jennifer freaks out and tries to run away from Ricky, he garrots her with a car antenna before making a cop shoot himself. Ricky takes the cop's gun, yada yada yada. Garbage day! And after shooting several people and blowing up a rather strange car, more cops turn up and Ricky is sectioned and committed. And you'd think that was the movie. But no, because when we come back from that flashback, it's revealed that Ricky has strangled Dr. Bloom with his own reel-to-reel tape and escaped the facility, leaving it down to a random detective and Sister Margaret to find Ricky before he finds a now heavily debilitated Mother Superior and gives her the old axe to the face treatment. In a film that honestly feels like it really shouldn't exist, but somehow does, will the police find Ricky in time? Will Ricky finally decide who's naughty and who's nice? And how was Ricky able to tell Dr. Bloom oddly specific details about what Billy got up to in the first movie when Billy was the only person to actually see these events? None of this and more will be answered if you take a look at Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. Sort of. And given that at least 30 to 40 minutes of this film is either footage from the first Silent Night, Deadly Night or part of an ultra-long extended credit sequence, it got me thinking about my thoughts on the script from the original film. Yes, odd that. I'm not doing that for the whole review. Life's too short. So, the first film was a more than solid Christmas slasher, arguably not as good as movies like Black Christmas or Christmas Evil, but solidly written, slightly campy in places, and heavy enough on the gore to hold my attention without it just feeling like a film going through the motions. This film, however, is pretty much entirely defined by a rather large issue of communication between the screenwriters and the people actively directing on set. You see, the character of Ricky in this was kind of poorly defined. The screenwriters and Eric Freeman, the guy who plays Ricky, wanted the character to be cold and calculating, the harder, more muted performance. The director and producer, though, were much more sold on a more bombastic performance, something in the same field as Freddy Krueger. And because of this disconnect, Eric had to try and play both. And this, in effect, absolutely defines and ruins the film in equal measures. Had they written for a bombastic character, it may have come across as a bit fake because they'd be playing to that expectation. Had they fully committed to playing it cold, it probably would have just been seen as a bit of an oddity of a production. But the results here are just so tonally bizarre that the film's able to carry itself to meme status as a work of infamy. Ignoring the fact that a decent chunk of this film is made up of another film, the new material is a bit lacking, honestly. What actually happens in this movie outside of the rerun stuff? Ricky gets adopted, scared by nuns, his stepdad dies, he kills a couple of weirdos, falls in love, kills someone in a jealous rage, gets his heart broke and then kills half a dozen other people, leading to a showdown with the Mother Superior. Someone who Ricky really didn't even have that much of a dealing with when all is said and done, honestly. In fact, that's pretty much this script's biggest problem. It feels like it wants to tell the story of Ricky and Billy, but because Billy's gone, rather than settle for that loss, they've just given Billy's lines to Ricky and then carried on with business as usual. The script's plagued with moments where Ricky recounts incidents that only Billy was ever witness to. There are moments Ricky recounts and claims to have remembered where not only could he have not seen what had happened, but he was like 2 years old, so he wouldn't understand the context, retain the memories, or anything like that. Even the ending with the showdown with the Mother Superior doesn't make that much sense in terms of how this film's played out. Had they chosen to play it out as Ricky getting retribution for his brother's murder, then maybe it could have been a bit better accepted as an ending for this. But it isn't. They just decide Ricky hates the Mother Superior for a ruthless punishment. Something that Ricky, as far as both films are considered, never really went through. That would be problematic enough, but even if you took Ricky's supposed motivations out of the equation and just decided to focus on what's explained in this film, there isn't really a lot on display. Ricky basically just sort of awkwardly bumbles from killing to killing, and the final act payoff isn't worth the paper it's written on because of all of the artificial tension. There's basically a 10-minute story here that's been padded out to 25 minutes by using a couple of vignettes and running scenes well past the length required to tell what little plot there actually is. The pacing is all over the place, mostly because this is a movie and a half that's been slammed together to try and make one coherent picture, and tonally, the two sides really don't work together well. The old stuff was slightly campy, but largely trying to just be a solid enough slasher film. This thing has 50,000 volts up it and is keeping things as camp as possible to the point that it neglects the gorier slasher elements of the first film in order to just be goofy and a bit absurdist. These two films don't feel like they occupy the same universe, with only the final confrontation scene being in any way something that I feel could have happened in the original Silent Night, Deadly Night. I can put part of this down to the fact that all of this additional footage was shot in a madcap 10-day shoot, so I appreciate that commitment to stylisation between the two films may have been a bit thin. But even then, and the dialogue as well, Jesus Christ, it's so basic. It really does feel like the screenwriters wrote this on a case of Budweiser over a long weekend. Nothing is given any more detail than a surface-level interpretation, and everything is told to us. They show nothing. Ricky only speaks in pseudo-profound short bursts, and when he does speak, it's usually just to say shit like, "I'm starting to like this film," or "Red car, very good." I'd have preferred him to be mute, honestly, other than maybe his garbage day line. In fact, yeah, that would have made the film 10 times better. Have him say nothing for the full runtime and then literally out of nowhere make his one and only line, "Garbage day!" That would have won me back over. But yeah, it's super stilted dialogue that doesn't really go anywhere, says surprisingly little, and while they nail some aspects of show don't tell, they really miss it where it counts most of the time. To be constructive, I think had the film ended at the point where Ricky escapes the facility, that probably would have both made the most sense and been the most satisfying way to close. Ending things a bit open with the possibility that Ricky is still out there to this day may not necessarily have been the greatest closer in the world, but it would have at least felt like an appropriate ending for the character. But having the extra scene where he Santas up and goes on the rampage, while a bit more of an explosive finale, makes almost no sense within the function of the rest of this film, and really just left me shrugging. The film was written by Michael Hickey, Paul Kaimi, and was also written and directed by Lee Harry. Both Michael and Paul have 2 credits each, both for this film and the original. And that's it. Lee has 3 writing and directing credits. This was his first of the 3, and arguably I would say it was his most memorable and infamous. He generally specialises in editing movie trailers. And that would explain a lot, as on the direction front, while the cast direction is somewhat fumbled, the broad direction within a production sense is actually not too bad on these newly shot bits. Scenes generally have a coherency, the padding is fairly obvious, but overlooking moments where it's clear that studio intervention has taken place, there's a definite professional veneer to the technical work on hand here. And I'd say Harry brings a very distinct vision forwards that almost definitely contrasts the style and feel of the original film, which I totally understand may cause split room thinking. I personally didn't completely get on with the jarring change in tone between the two films. I'd have rather just had a Ricky movie than the 45-minute, 35-minute split that we get here, but I can see how some people would just fall in love with the weirdness that this film has going for it. That's not to let direction of the cast get off lightly though. Even with the communication issues on set around how cast members should perform and what their motivations are, it's still a pretty poor showing. With the cast seemingly just being encouraged to look vaguely near the camera, stand perfectly still unless told otherwise, and to read their lines as written and nothing else. And the most bizarre thing of all is, given how OTT they make Eric in this, they make everyone else totally muted. Which, if anything, just makes Eric look even weirder and makes everyone else look like they literally couldn't be asked to be there. It's just such a weird choice, and I feel it completely lends to the film's infamy. Given the mixed direction, the Cine is actually pretty solid as well. I feel that's another benefit of having a director on board who also works in editing. It's that he knows what shots are going to be needed in order to have something to work with in the edit. And here, it doesn't disappoint. We have a very wide variety of shot types on display, composition ranges from passable to decent, and sequences have been constructed utilising relatively quick cuts that do help to show more than tell where they can. I mean, it's a pain that the script tells anyway, but at least from a Cine perspective, I can't complain about how they choose to show things. There's a wide variety of shot types on display, my personal favourite being the garbage day scene where they utilise a very long front-facing tracking shot of Eric walking down his neighbourhood shooting people, but there's also pans, Dutch angles and other funky and interesting experimentation used throughout. It really gives off the vibe that this was a somewhat stressful set to be on, but one that wasn't afraid to at least try to have a bit of fun with what it was doing. So I'd say it's probably my second favourite thing about this film. The performances are a total flop. Eric Freeman is literally the best part of this movie, and he's only good because he commits so wholeheartedly to whatever the hell the crew wanted him to do on a scene-by-scene basis that he's just utterly mesmerising to watch. Do I think he gives a good, realistic performance? Absolutely not. But do I think he's entertaining in that performance and positively Daffy Duck? Yes. Yes I do. And I think he's more than earned his place on the board of respected bad performances in Hollywood who at least tried to give the crew what they wanted. The rest of the cast? It's a wonder they're awake. The big issue with making most of the new parts of the film flashbacks is that it means no one actor or character outside of Eric really gets enough screen time to set any kind of impression other than passable or weird. And that's basically the whole movie. Actors either being just about acceptable on the performance front or looking or feeling like they've just stepped out of RoboCop. And finally, the soundtrack. And this film's strongest element is arguably its top-notch scoring. Seriously, if we're taking calls for films with scores they don't deserve, this has got to be up there. It's a creepy but relatively powerful slasher horror scoring at its most menacing. And while it could possibly be called a touch generic, and I could see an argument for it, at worst it's well-made generic scoring, and at best it's totally underlooked. A real winner for me. I'd say it gets my thumbs up, and it'd be one I'd quite like to own on vinyl. Silent Night Deadly Night 2 didn't get released in the UK until November 2020. And the reason a release got stalled for this is quite possibly the most Silent Night Deadly Night 2 reason you could possibly believe. So bearing in mind that the BBFC didn't have to ban the original Silent Night Deadly Night, they just told the filmmakers at the time that unless they made significant cuts to the footage that the film wouldn't be granted a certification and would effectively be banned. So the filmmakers just didn't bother to cut the film and it just never came out in the UK. Well, Silent Night Deadly Night 2 almost purposefully chopped down the first film by about 50%, but still left in those problematic scenes. So when it was submitted to the BBFC in 1987, they were basically handed the same note again saying make significant cuts or we just won't give the film a certificate, so the filmmakers just didn't bother releasing the film in the UK again. It was never formally banned because they were warned off it in advance. That ban stayed in place until 101 Films submitted both films for a Blu-ray release, and they were passed uncut and released as a special edition set in November of that year. They now also have separate solo releases that are pretty decently priced. Extras on this set are plentiful, the best for my money being a short film called Eric Today, where we catch up with Eric Freeman in character as Ricky to see what he's been up to since 1987, which was nice in and of itself. So I'd say this was definitely worth the money. Silent Night Deadly Night 2 is a problematic film. I'd hesitate to even really call it a film as it's really more of a best of with a couple of short films stapled to it. I don't think it holds together as well as the original Silent Night Deadly Night, and If I'm being honest, I think it works better as a series of moments than a film itself. Like, as a thing you can watch with friends and get some quotable lines from, this is brilliant, but as an actual film, something to sit and analyse, yeah, it's not so good. With a score in Cine that's trying its best, it's just that script, the performances and the mixed direction that lets this thing down ultimately. I still honestly think it would have worked better as a standalone film. I don't think they needed to drag the first film into it at all, but I can totally see why this film has the cult following that it does too. Worth watching at least once. I'd say if you haven't seen this one before, check it out, though your mileage may vary. And with that, we've reached the end of yet another season. I want to thank everyone who's tuned in over the years and continued to support the channel despite my ever-increasing wandering into ever more obscure circles. I really couldn't do it without you guys, so thank you, sincerely. And I want to wish you all a happy and safe holiday season, and the best and brightest of New Years. We'll be back in the new year with a new season, most likely February, so until then, have a good one. Till next time.